Hello, everyone. We are about 1 minute from the top of the hour, so we are just going to give a couple of minutes here, maybe 1 or 2 more minutes for the last couple of people to log in and join us today. So we're going to get started here at about 2 minutes past the hour. So hang tight. We'll be right back.
All right, folks, we're gonna go ahead and get started. I'm not gonna take up too much time because I wanna give optimal time for our presenter today, David from Virtuous. Again, I'm Emma from Elevation. Just wanna let you guys know that I will be sending out a recording of the webinar today, just in case you aren't able to jot down every single note. You will have a copy, don't worry about it. I also want to let you know that we will be having, this will be our last webinar of the year, so that's okay. I'm a little sad about it, but that's okay. We'll be having some new ones coming up in the new year. In addition, we'll be having a live question and answer at the end. So jot down those questions, keep them, because we'll be sure to get to them. In addition, this webinar will be running about 45 minutes today, so a little bit shorter than usual. So you will have a little extra time. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Kyle, who will be introducing our presenter.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon to any East Coasters and everyone else. Good morning. So David is here from Virtuous, and David leads the customer-facing and business development for Virtuous Software. They are a cloud software company focused on reimagining generosity in the nonprofit space. David has been in Phoenix, Arizona for over 30 years, along with his wife and 3 kids. While hobbies have eluded him since having kids, most of his days are spent playing with them, hiking, and exploring along the Mogollon Rim and experiencing all of the good food in Arizona. So we will go ahead and hand things over to David, who is going to be talking about us today about generosity and the power of personalization.
Awesome. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Emma. It's great to be here today, guys. And really, today I wanted we're going to dive into this whole idea of how personalizing conversations, marketing, messaging can really impact generosity. Like Kyle said, my name is David. I focus on all our growth initiatives here at Virtuous. Virtuous is a software system or technology tool that really helps bridge the gap between being able to personalize conversations, but having limited time and staff, a CRM that really helps drive that. We're not going to talk really much about Virtuous at all today, but what we are going to talk about is this agenda here. And we're going to talk first just about what this whole personalization trend, where has it come from? How has technology impacted it? How, when you personalize your marketing and your outreach, can that impact fundraising and how it does? How technology can really help bridge the chasm of, you have a lot of things to do. You have so many things in your day. You can only reach so many people. How does technology help you do that? And then some practical ways to even plan for, to think about how to personalize, and some things that you can do today even without new software. So we'll start today. We love this quote at Virtuous because it really encapsulates a lot of why we do, that modern donors expect transparency, sophisticated storytelling, and technical savvy from their charitable organizations. And they'll give not only their money, but will volunteer and lend the force of their entire networks or social networks to a cause that they believe in. So when they see that, right, they're willing to give not only their money, but their whole selves. So let's take a step back though, and really understand the whole shift in the marketing, the personalization, the internet and technology, and what's happened. And if you haven't felt it, right, technology has fundamentally shifted how we experience the world today. I think we can all agree that's been a quick and rapid change over the last 20 years. The biggest part of that, right, coming from the evolution of the internet, this little thing that didn't exist really 25 years ago, that's been part of the huge seismic shift in the last 20 years. So what do we mean, even not only the internet coming around, but how rapidly it's evolved? So let's take a step, let's hop in our time machine, and let's go back to 1996. And that's what Amazon.com looked like in 1996, which doesn't seem like that long ago, right? This was still the mid-late 90s, right? Amazon was a thing, but that was what it looked like. And the whole age of the internet, this was really around the time of, we like to describe this as the one-to-many time, right? Where every person, from me and you and anyone across the globe, if we went to Amazon.com, we saw the exact same site with the same links as anybody else, right? And then kind of think about marketing and outreach and any sort of general communications, very much newsletter style, one-to-many, right? Dear friend, dear name. And everything is just one-to-many. But fast forward to today, the internet has moved and shifted quickly to this whole idea of one-to-one. So now this is Amazon in 2018. And this is actually a personal account of ours where you can see how, because we've got kids and we're buying books and tons of tube socks because they go through them, right? Amazon is taking the information that it knows about us to recommend things that we might like, right? Based on our buying habits, our search histories, and all of that. Whether you like that or not, that's kind of what the world has shifted to. And right, Amazon's just one example. It's not just Amazon, right? Think about every other brand that you might interface with. And then even think about down to the mom and pop shop and the local pizza place, right? If I call Domino's today, it's like, hey, David, do you think you want those pepperoni and sausage that you got last time? Everyone is trying to use that to cut through the noise, to personalize the experience, to get your attention. And that's been the shift, right? Whether for better or for worse, that is what the world now experiences when they go to the internet and their brands and everything that they interface with on a day-to-day basis. So let's zoom in a little further. How has that reality, right, of everything moving to one-to-one from your favorite brands to right, anything you might purchase from, how has that impacted the world of philanthropy and fundraising and generosity? So there's a couple things. We're going to talk about a couple problems that we identified and then a few discoveries to really start to think about how we can adapt and adopt this in the fundraising world. So 2 problems to start. The first problem, you guys may or may not experience this in your everyday life today. And that's that the fundraising world sometimes hasn't caught up to, from a systems perspective, where the technology world is today. Original kind of fundraising management, donor management, think about marketing, was all built under that concept of one-to-many, right? I'm going to have a system that collects and stores information, Generally, a lot of them were even built more for accounting, where we want to figure out what the gift was, who was it from, what fund does it apply to, and let's receipt them. They were functionally built to handle that one-to-many world. And so a lot of times you have very little donor knowledge. It's difficult to personalize when you don't know much about them. You have really high operational costs, and then a system that really was designed more for accounting. And so just by the nature of those systems and processes that sometimes are put in place, constituents and your donors start to feel less like it's someone that they partner with and more like it's a bill collector or utility company just sending out the same thing over and over again. And it's a problem. You don't have the tools today to really to capitalize on that market. So there's the internal problem, right? One, you don't have the tools. Sometimes you don't have the support and processes. And the other big problem is what we just talked about. The whole world has made this shift, and donors now today expect a personal connection, right? They're getting it from every other area in their life. And if the nonprofit world, if they haven't made that shift to personalized marketing, you start to lose attention. And we also believe at Virtuous that giving, when you give your money, right, that is very intrinsically personal. It's one of the most personal things you can do when you're giving your time and your talent and your money to a cause, right? It's your whole self a lot of times. And so how much more so is it important to personalize the communication back? Not only are they getting it from everywhere else, but just the nature of giving is very personal. And so nonprofits really stand the most to gain from personalized one-to-one marketing. And I also am a firm believer that donors do have the best intentions. This isn't a competitive nature where we're trying to undercut folks and get our message through, but think about your inbox over the last week. Hundreds and hundreds of messages, most likely. There is so much noise today. We've got messages that are ringing on our phone and our inbox and popping up on the internet, and it's noise. And a lot of time, right, if we don't at least cut through the noise with something that captures their attention, that personalizes it in a way that they'll open, click, and read through, right, it's difficult to garner that attention because of that noise. Even though, right, I want to pay, a good example of this is, hey, I want to pay my electricity bill. I would love to keep the lights on. But unless that thing comes out of my bank account every single month, I probably forget. It's just the nature of the busy lives that we lead, right? If we don't have a personal connection, if that message isn't coming through to remind us in a very personal way to continue to give, we forget just the nature of the world. So 2 problems. But here's what we've discovered around the nature of giving, how this whole technology shift has really affected it. And the first discovery is that donors really do value relationships over institutions, right? They don't give to a name or a logo or a building, right? Or even a website. They give to people. And today, especially again with the access to information and how the world has shifted, donors become more distrustful of institutions, right? If it just seems like a form letter, if it seems impersonal, if it seems like we're just giving to a big gray box, they become distrustful. A lot of times you see the rise of peer-to-peer giving and these other areas, right? Donors rely on relationships, trusted relationships, their passions to drive giving. And a good example, right, is right, they might see someone, they gave to this cause because they know a friend who volunteers, who promotes the charity, or they got invited to a fun run, or maybe they have a local connection, a friend that was impacted by the work, right? There's generally some sort of personal connections there that drive giving. But unfortunately, right, a lot of charities and fundraising organizations are still sending one-to-many traditional big broadcast type communications with little personal or local connection. Right? Well, we can understand what makes them tick, what makes them give, what causes they care about, right? Who they know, have they volunteered, do they have a local connection? We can start to use this to really create personal, meaningful conversations. The next big discovery is that fans, people who just love you, are also great fundraisers. Right? Think about in the last few years, right? We have the Ice Bucket Challenge where donors are dumping buckets of water on their heads, right? They're doing push-up challenges. They're right? Giving to their favorite charity for their birthday. And you think about Charity Water's birthday campaigns, right? Fan-driven fun runs from Susan G. Komen. You have a lot of celebrity partnerships. You're getting folks who identify, right, and see their identity as being part of a cause. And when they have opportunities to share what you're doing, when they care about these things, right, you can turn them into huge advocates. And so you don't have to, right? The unfortunate part is that most organizations do rely, and most of the burden of fundraising falls on a couple staff members, right? To do donor development, to do all of that work instead of empowering their fans, their volunteers, the people who care to become fundraisers themselves. And the way to do that, right, is to know who they are, know what makes them tick, and be able to reach out to them. The other discovery we're finding is that, right, folks are very data-driven in their decision-making, but access to data sometimes is very overwhelming. And right, this data can have an impact. So think about right, big data being used for program accountability. So folks have access with Charity Water to be able to see like real-time GPS data. And so having data is so important and critical. But you can also use data even internally for yourself, because you know, right, people have been giving in various sizes over various amounts of time to different projects and different funds. They might have attended different events, have different passions, have different relationships and friends, live in different neighborhoods, right? All of these are data points that generally we know about our donors already. And if we're able to use that, we can personalize it using the data we have. But unfortunately, right, the technology that's in existence at most organizations today doesn't allow you to see a person with that whole holistic view. A lot of times it's just a row in a database. Here's the gift, here's the name, here's where it went. And so most of our time, from a personalization standpoint, stays with our major donors. Major donors get that attention. But what we see, right, there's a good reason that we spend a lot of time cultivating major donor relationships. It's because personalization works. When you know what makes them tick, when you know why they give, when you understand their motivations, their relationships, who they are as a person, right? We can use that to really create meaningful relationships, and they tend to give and give abundantly. But that's difficult when you don't have unlimited time in the day. How do you do that and scale that for everybody? Create a feeling that major donors have, right, with your organization. How do you create that for a $10 donor versus to a $10 million donor? And so what we're seeing now is, because everyone expects personal connections, because that's what the world is giving them, there's a growing chasm now between donors and charities. This is the biggest thing that we see as an issue in organizations. One we're really working to solve is that 76% of donors do not go on to give a second gift. So something drove them, got them excited about your cause. They gave a first gift, right? That was a big moment and a big thing that happened to make that happen. But then what happened after the fact that that second gift didn't come in? Maybe they didn't get a personal thank you quick enough. Maybe they just kept getting the same newsletter with the same financial ask. Whatever it might be, right? The whole idea there is we have to continue to engage them in the same personal, meaningful way that drove them to give for the first time. And so again, on the left, we see donors value relationships over institutions. They want measurable, holistic results. They care about and expect personalized experiences. Ultimately, right, a big part is they want to see the impact of their gift, right? They're not giving to a big gray box. They want to see and be a part of the cause. And when they do, right, it's all about more than financial giving. It's time, talent, social capital. But it's difficult, right? On the nonprofit world today, a lot of times you rely on just a few staff members that you have to provide that personal touch. And a lot of times you can only do that for the top 10% of your donors. Much of the work depends on your staff to do all of it, not turning fans into fundraisers. Much of the communication is still broadcast style, and there's just a disconnect from modern donors. So we're going to talk a little bit about how technology can close this, But then we're also going to talk and give some practical examples, just thinking, how do we start from square one? So there are technology stacks available and different technology out there that can really help you bridge this gap of how do I do what I would want to do for my major donors, personalize experiences. How do I do that for everybody? It's difficult, right? With the technology, with the staff resources. And so what you need are a few different things. One, you need a CRM, a donor management system that really helps you know and understand who these people are, more than just their financial giving. Think about personal passions, giving capacity. What's their social media data telling us? Wealth data. Who are their friends? Where do they live, right? Holistic view, treating all information as important about a donor, not just their financial giving. But then being able to, how do we cultivate relationships at scale, right? You're probably using tools today for email marketing. You might have, right, some other direct mail services, but how do we kind of bring these together to automate the types of conversations and touch points and emails and calls and all of these things so they're going out at the right time to the right person? And then ultimately, once we know information, we can personalize it, we can market it back out, giving them ways to give, whether or not it's financially, but giving them and asking them for the right thing, but then allowing them multiple ways to give. So the first one, right, you think about insights to know each donor. It's more than just financial data. A lot of things that Virtuous focuses on and things that we can be using today in the technology world are social media, right? Being able to pull in and look at a donor's entire kind of social media network. What do they give to? What do they care about? How well connected are they? Right? Insights to help you know. A great example, and this is actually a customer example for one of Virtuous's customers, is they were able to identify folks who were social media influencers, what they called. So people who had, 2,000 or more Twitter followers. Using Virtuous, were able to identify that. And instead of, right, at the end of the year campaign, they had a big event coming up. So instead of just asking everyone, hey, come invited everyone to them, what they're able to do is separate out their social media influencers and ask them, say, hey, you guys have a wide network, a big reach, you've got a blog, you've got some followership. Can you ask them, we want to ask you guys to tweet about our upcoming event or our fundraiser or this next cause. We don't want you to give $50. Because in all reality, right, they might be a poor college kid they don't have $50 to their name, but they have a megaphone to 10,000 people. So better to ask them for what they can give in the moment, rather than just kind of the blanket, everyone gets the same ask. So when you know your donors, it helps you make better asks. All right. But the whole idea of knowing your donors is now we want to use information to really personalize the type of conversations, communications, emails that go back out. But before we do that and even talk about that, I want to hit pause and describe and define this whole world, this word called marketing automation. What the heck is that? You also, right, in the nonprofit world, you might hear this idea of moves management. Really, this whole idea is, hey, we have this series of follow-ups we want to do. So if someone gives a gift of a certain size, we want to send them these 3 things. Or when someone attends an event, we want to make sure they get a call, and all of these things happen. Really, marketing automation, it happens everywhere else in businesses and organizations using this. It's software, right, that helps organizations market through multiple channels by automating like repetitive tasks or series of tasks that you would normally do. So it helps you, again, when you think about staff time and limitations, helps you personalize communications for 10,000 donors in ways that only used to be possible for your top 100. Here's a good example of how you've probably seen marketing automation today in action. So imagine it's Christmas, right? Maybe I bought my kids a new pair of shoes today. There's a good chance in about 2-ish, 3-ish days or whenever, Amazon might send me another email and says, hey, David, how are you liking those shoes? Using the data it knows. And then recommending, hey, we think because you bought these Nikes, you might want these extra shoelaces and maybe the shoe polish. And here are some other cool brands that you might like, right? That's marketing automation in action. It took what it knew about me, what I bought, and it served me up some info that it thought it might be valuable. That's all it is, right? And so it automated that email based on what I did. That's what marketing automation is. And so how do we apply this to the whole idea of personalization, right? We want to create tailored conversations with our donors to build trust. Now think about even from a high level, simple ways that you can start to think about segmenting and automating donors, right? Wouldn't it be great if, based on the size of the gift, maybe over $1,000 or under $1,000, we could send a specific message that was either from our executive director or maybe from our director of development. So it would change. Or maybe the thank you messaging would be a little different. Maybe the one who gave over 1,000 might get an invite to a special event. Maybe, again, so on and so forth. And so think about automation as a way to create personalized follow-ups driven by all the data that you know about your donors, right? So you can have tasks created, phone calls, right? Being able to create these journeys. That's what marketing automation is all about. And again, we kind of talked about it is a pervasive thing. It's what's driving a lot of the one-to-one personalization in the internet age today. 70% of businesses, even mom and pop, are using marketing automation to tailor customer experiences. And the last kind of idea is once you know and you have insights into who they are, you can tailor conversations and really create personal journeys, but then using the data to make better asks and the right ask based on who they are. Again, the example of poor college kid, we don't want to ask him for $100. We might want to ask him or her for something different. And so being able to use that data, you want technology, and technology should be able to help you understand what might be the next best ask. Is it a financial gift ask? Is it maybe a planned ask, a time for, considering putting the organization in your will and bequest? Is it a social ask? Maybe we're asking them to do an event or some neighborhood, but customized gift asks using analytics is a big piece of what can help you personalize with technology. But, right, you may not have capacity, right, to even look at new technology today. So there are some simple ways to start thinking about this now and how you even launch a personalization strategy today. And so there's some simple exercises. I'll give a couple examples. And then at the very end, we're going to have a document that you can get on Virtuous where it actually helps you plan out content and think about this holistically. So 5 steps to even start building a personalization strategy today. So the first thing, gather up all the different brand touches on all the channels that reach your constituents. So you might have several emails put together. You might have some videos. You're going to have content on the web. You're going to have all these different pieces of content that are reaching your constituents on all different channels: email, web, direct mail, in person. Think about all those and gather them up, put them on a desk. All right, so then start to think about all the different touch points that your donor goes through, from the time they give a first gift, to that thank you, to the follow-up, to how do they even hear about us. Organize those touch points into a single view and do that chronologically. Start to identify what's the typical journey that one of our donors go through. Where do they start and what did they see? What happened next and what was the next ask after that? Maybe it was our donation page and they saw a video. There was some copy on the page and then they clicked and then they got a confirmation, and start to plan it and plot it out to chronological order to start to think about, all right, what's the typical journey that a donor goes through from start to finish? Then you're going to start to realize that you have a couple distinct personas that start to emerge. You might have a lot of folks that just go through your email, right? You might have some that are coming through direct mail, and they're going to be a different type of persona. And what you're going to want to do is start to think about who are those different personas. Maybe we do have a big influx of folks who are college age and influencers in their space. Maybe we do have a lot of folks who are plus 65, and we need to start thinking about will and bequest. Maybe, again, it's, we're doing work for veteran services, and so we have a lot of veterans or wives and families of veterans who are givers to us. And so you'll start to realize that there are personas of different types of people. And each one of those, right, is going to need a specific type of journey. They're going to want to see different content based on who they are and what they care about. So the next one is, now that you have kind of the chronological order of what the normal path is. You have different personas identified. Now you want to take a chance to go through and look at all the content that you have. Videos, emails, blogs, letters, notes, speeches, anything that you've ever done, right? We want to map our best content. So maybe you have this video that's really going to resonate more with your college age donors rather than, right, the older ones. So make sure that that content is front and center at the start of the journey for your college age students. Putting the content and now mapping it to that journey that we have identified. Figure out where the most natural place is. And then you might start to identify, oh, hey, well, this video doesn't really make sense for this persona. So we might want to commission a couple new pieces of content to fill in the gaps. So we have really this process now laid out. Maybe it's on a table, maybe it's on a board. We have a couple different personas, the different parts of their journey here. We have an email, we want to call there, we want to say thanks then, this is the video we send, this is the blog we point them to, and we have that kind of mapped out. And now here's the part where we can take that process and we can put in place with the tools we have today a basic workflow. Some of this might take some effort from a manual effort with the team to say, hey, we're going to use MailChimp here, we're going to export from the CRM there, we're going to make sure that we send this link, and there might be some technology touch points that are slightly disjointed. But let's start small today. Just figuring out who those different types of folks are, what content is the best and the most relevant for each one of them, and simply making sure that you're segmenting and sending them something slightly different for now. As you start to create that pattern and that becomes part of the culture, then you can start to think of, how do we do this faster? How do we even get more granular into the types of personas and things that we're sending them? And then that's where a tool and a technology tool that can automate a lot of that becomes very valuable. But at the start, right, just getting these things done, getting the content on the table, mapping it out in a chronological order, figuring out who these different personas are is step one. And the big part to remember, so what I tell a lot of our customers is technology is only part of the solution. Marketing automation and all of these things, it's not a magic wand by any means, right? It is a tool just like a hammer and a saw are to build something. We're only as good, the tool is only as good as the strategy, the support, right? And all the things that come behind that. So the biggest thing for thriving in 2018, almost now 2019, requires a culture shift. Adopting a mentality of change, right? Increasing trust amongst other departments, embracing that change, and encouraging, hey, it's not going to be perfect. We will fail, but moving towards consistency and personalizing the conversations is what it takes. And that's the biggest thing I'll tell customers is don't worry so much about the technology. Don't think about moving data and how you might build it and learning the tool. Think about the change, the culture that has to get embraced to make this now a part of what our DNA is. All right, so I'm going to walk through a few just practical examples of things that we've seen folks automate that are really impactful. And you start to think about how a tool can do this, but even just how I could do this today. Simple things like this go a long way. You may be doing some of this today. If you are, that's amazing. You're well ahead of even where most of the industry is, but just some food for thought. So you may have multiple different projects or funds, a general fund, a building fund. In this case, we have an example where you can give to a school in Malawi. And so donors might be able to choose, hey, based on where I'm giving $50 to our Malawi school today. So what we want to do is say, hey, because they gave to the Malawi school, we want to make sure that they get a welcome series of a few emails that are specific about the project that they gave to. We don't want to tell them about the wells that we're digging. We don't want to talk about just our general overview. We want to talk about where they gave. And so think about this, right? Giving to a project, and day one, right, we get an email. Hey, thanks for giving to the school. Here's a short video of all the awesome work that you're now enabling. Day three, Email 2, hey, note from the principal of the school, here's a couple stories about the students that you're affecting in other school projects, right? Day 5, another email, hey, we want to encourage you to talk about this and tell the world about the impact. Here are 3 ways that you can get the word out. So notice we still haven't asked for another gift. It's still been specific. Day 6, hey, we need to make sure that someone calls. So someone on the donor development team, volunteer, executive director, wanted to give you a call and give you an update on the progress of our school. So everything focused around where they gave. Today, this might be, hey, we have to do this out of MailChimp. We have to automate and manually create some tasks. That's okay, but write it down. Try to make this consistent. And then as you start to run up against the time block of, hey, we just don't have enough time in the day, then start to think about, hey, how can a tool help us get there? Here's another great example when you start to think about how to treat different donors differently based on who they are and their age and location and all of this. So let's say, hey, we want to find folks who are over 55 and maybe have a wealth score, right, if you're using wealth analytics over, XYZ. And so again, instead of including them in our normal end of the year campaign with a $100 ask, we're going to start to include them to say at first, hey, thanks so much for your faithfulness. You've been a giver for a while. Have you thought about generationally now how you can affect students in Malawi? Learn more about our legacy giving program. So just even segmenting and self-identifying those with one email and a follow-up note. Again, focusing on the words, the language, the content that's going to be relevant to them. Thanks for your faithfulness. Our legacy team, right, talking about generational impact and following up with a handwritten note. Last example before we'll dive into Q&A time. But now we can start to think about, again, we have financial giving, we have giving based on age and will and bequest. Now we can talk about how do we ask people to be advocates, not necessarily with finance, but with their time and with their influence. So if a donor, and this is something you could identify in Virtuous, has a high social score. So hey, they have a lot of folks on Twitter that follow them. They're fairly well connected. We want to ask you, hey, help us build, we need your influence to help us build this new school. So we're gonna give you these ones. You can post to your social. Here's the link. We've pre-created them for you to post out. Help us host a local event or chat with our team about where you can have the biggest impact. So finding those influencers and asking them for something slightly more specific in ways that they would be most responsive to. Video 2, right, day 2, email, hey, learn more about the project. Here's some content that you can use to help amplify. And then again, we want to partner with you. Let's talk about some non-financial ways that you can make an impact. So those are examples about just things that you can think about from a donor journey, how to segment, and things that will be helpful. I did want to talk, and if you are interested, thinking about practical ways to map out content, donor journeys, and just getting started with figuring out ways to personalize. We've got a great content mapping guide for nonprofits at Virtuous, so you can go to virtuouscrm.com/plan, and there will be that guide available for you to download where you can start mapping out your content, thinking about personas, and getting a head start on just segmenting and starting small. And that's a big thing I'll encourage everyone today. Don't worry about boiling the ocean all at once. You can get a little overwhelmed when you start to think about how vast and how much you want to personalize and all the types of content. Start small, start with something attainable, and just focus on being consistent with one thing at a time, and then build from there. Generally, we'll start to snowball and you'll see success over time. So I'm going to open it up now for Q&A. Kyle and Emma, I think you guys might lead that for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for all of that really great information. I like that phrase that you used there at the very end, to not try to boil the ocean all at once. And I think that's always an important reminder, because there are so many times when we try to take on everything at once and it becomes overwhelming. So I think, exactly like you said, focusing on one thing at a time really helps. So at this point, we are going to open up the floor for questions. So if anybody does have any questions, feel free to submit them there into that Q&A box, where we will receive them. We'll be fielding those questions. And in the meantime, there were a couple that came up on our end as we were kind of listening along. And the first of those is something that I think everybody has seen in the news recently, given the data breaches at Facebook and a lot of other companies too. And when it comes to data, on your end of things, have you seen people become more data sensitive? And is it something that we should tread a little bit more carefully about? What do you think, David?
Yeah, there are always the tried and true principles from any sort of outreach to give folks lots of ways to opt out, give folks a good understanding of why they're receiving this message. I think everyone today, from a privacy standpoint, is understanding that, when we do click accept on terms and conditions for Facebook and Twitter, there's an understanding that some of the data that's being captured is being used. But we want to be sensitive to the fact that they need to be able to opt out, and they need to know why they're receiving information like this. And I think especially when folks are giving, there's a good indication there that they're involved in your cause. So just using information that they know you would already know. They know, we know your address, and the last gift you gave was over $500, and you maybe gave to the school building project. None of that is out of this world. And so I think, even again, starting small, using that data rather than trying to scrape like public data and wealth analytics and social data and getting too crazy, starting with just the data that you already know, and serving that up in a way that's just more meaningful to them. I think that works.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a good point too, to make sure that those opt-out options are always available to let those users know, and any receivers of this kind of information, that they do have that option whenever they want.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other question that we had, you had talked a little bit about personas. And personas is something that we also talk a lot about here on our end, and in a lot of the content that we create. What we were wondering is if you had any tips on how to kind of build out those personas beyond donor history, beyond what their social influence might be. Is there something else that we can kind of look into to help create a more well-defined persona that we can create that journey for?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I think, again, back to what I said about boiling the ocean, you can get pretty crazy with the amount of personas that you can try and create. But if you've got 15, 20 plus personas, then you have to have 15 to 20 unique journeys created for each of them, and it starts to get a little overwhelming. So when you start to think about the types of ways to segment, you can do that, right, in a lot of ways. You have giving amount as one way to do it. So being able to separate based on, right, a first-time gift size, overall life-to-date giving, mid-major kind of donors. Think about recurring donors. But then you start to think about, well, who are these types of folks, right? Are they former veterans? Are they moms? Are they teachers, right? Maybe there's an audience from a professional standpoint. And so I think as you start to look first at just mapping out your content, one thing that usually comes up is there starts to become a pattern as to like how your content is even separated. You might have a lot of videos based on a certain project, or you might have emails that are intended for a certain audience. And so a lot of that becomes, at least from the first part, organic. I would say don't start with more than 5 at first. Until you can remain consistent in following up with each of them and being consistent with the journey there that you've created for each of those personas, then you can start to expand and get more granular.
Perfect. And we do have one question that came in here from Suzanne. And this is a question that I think a lot of nonprofits ask a lot, and it's something that people, often have to choose. And she's asking if a personally written note, personally written thank you note specifically, if that is more effective than a personalized typed letter on letterhead.
Yeah, no, great question. This is one area I love when we talk about what's the right thing, the best answer, the best practice. The answer, Suzanne, is it could be both. I think the general hunch is that personal handwritten stuff works well, but especially here at Virtuous and personally, what I always tell folks is test everything, right? If you want to figure out, maybe have a handwritten note with the same content, the same ask, the same follow-up, and then that same one typed up on letterhead, and send it out to 50 donors and the other half to the other 50, and see if there was a different response rate. Because one thing with how fast technology changes, and as we kind of saw with how things changed the last 20 years, what worked last year might not work this year. And so testing and optimizing everything, and really thinking about how can I use the data that we have to understand that. So that's why having a CRM and having something that you can track that piece of data, say, hey, what was more effective, that handwritten note or a personal typed letter? And so I know it's kind of a non-answer, but I hate saying that there's a best practice because they change so often, and each org is different and each donor is different. So that's why testing is critical to do both and figure out what works for your donors specifically. Good question.
Perfect. A/B testing is definitely something that we always talk about on our end too. And so I think that's going to be it for right now for our Q&A. I'm going to hand things over to Emma for some final wrap up.
Yeah, we're coming on just at 45 minutes now, so I just want to be respectful to what I said before, make sure we're cutting it right at the same time. Just to let everyone know, again, I will be sending out a copy of this webinar, so if you want to rewatch, see any of the awesome information that David presented again, you will have access to that. In addition, like I said, we won't be having any more webinars this year, but you know, pay attention. We're going to be having some coming up in 2019. That's so crazy I'm saying that. And then also, if anyone is free later, Kyle and I will be presenting on Salsa Lab's webinar at 2 p.m. If you'd like to register, you can check our Twitter profile at elevation_web, and there is a link to registration there. I want to thank David so much for being with us today. It was awesome. I know I learned a ton, and I hope that everyone else did as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Bye, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.